A warm welcome to the Booms and Bus Show. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. My name is Jonathan Davis, and today is Monday the 2nd of July, 2018. And 102 years ago, yesterday, July the 1st, 1916, we had the Battle of the Somme. 57,470 British casualties in a single day. Each one a husband, a father, a son, a brother. On one day. And that was just the British. Never mind the Australians, the Canadians, New Zealanders, I think Indians. And indeed, what about the other side? The Germans, who we were fighting. Our grandfathers and great-grandfathers were fighting for our freedoms. With their lives, with their limbs, indeed with their mental states, because we know all about the PSTD that happened during and subsequently. And we must never forget. We must never, ever forget. And when I read about these idiot so-called social justice warriors with their masks, throwing Molotov cocktails, bashing free speech activists, indeed the police, and they actually believe they're fighting for freedoms, it beggars belief what is going through their heads. Talking of SJWs, social justice warriors, let's listen for a few minutes to the great commentator of today, Mr. Jonathan Pye. I hasten to say that there are some naughty words in this, so you might want to move forward 7.5 minutes if you don't want to hear such things.
Okay. Well, it's a beautiful day, so we're up on the studio roof. Today we'll be discussing Laura Ingalls Wilder, author of The Little House on the Prairie books, whose name has been removed from a writing award because her books display stereotypical attitudes and contain racial language. Well, duh. Of course they do. Sorry. Okay, go again. Yeah. Well, it's a beautiful day, so we're up on the studio roof. Today we're going to be discussing Laura Ingalls Wilder, author of The Little House on the Prairie books, whose name has been removed from a writing award because her books display stereotypical attitudes and contain racial language. I mean, for fuck's sake, I'd be fucking amazed if they didn't, frankly. These books, they're based on the author's childhood between 1870 and 1894. That's like 5 years after slavery was abolished. The books were written during the Jim Crow laws. It's almost as if cultural norms aren't fixed and change with the passage of time. Who is this helping? No one. No one needs protecting from Little House on the fucking Prairie. Or, for that matter, the racially charged language of Huckleberry Finn, or To Kill a Mockingbird, or fucking... What does this achieve? Who does this help? Stop sanitising and denying the past to make yourself look good. I'm sick of it. It's utter bullshit. And it's fucking everywhere you look. We live in the most inclusive, progressive, diverse, prosperous society ever in human history, yet we behave as if we've never had it so fucking bad. We're told that there is prejudice wherever you look, because there aren't enough female biographies on Wikipedia or enough BAME cyclists on the road. Apparently, the biggest challenge to London cyclists is not safety, it's diversity. We used to react to prejudice. Now we actively seek it out, often where it doesn't fucking exist. Fucking Google has taken the egg out of its salad emoji to make it more inclusive for vegans. Is there a single vegan in the world that feels triggered or oppressed or unrepresented by a salad emoji with an egg in it? What does this achieve? Who does this help? My generation, right, we've never really had to fight for much. Gay rights certainly has come a long way in my lifetime, but, I mean, we never had to fight for the vote. We never had to fight in a fucking war. You know, my grandmother watched the Battle of Britain taking place above her house. Nazis in planes over her house attempting to invade our country. Actual Nazis. I'm not talking Trump voters, actual Nazis. Recently, you had Vogue magazine saying tackling women's issues today is harder than women's battle for the vote. You pampered, privately educated cunts. The suffragettes went on fucking hunger strike. Emily Davidson sacrificed her life. Wearing a Louis Vuitton black dress on a red carpet is not the same as jumping in front of a fucking racehorse. Stop fucking demonstrating how fucking worthy you are. And it's fucking, look at this, it's fucking everything. It's everything, right? What's this? The Pride fucking sponsored Costa coffee. Who does this help? I'd like a skinny latte, please, with 1 pump of sugar-free hazelnut syrup. Would you like it in a cup that publicly displays that you're happy with the notion of same-sex couples having the right to... I just want a fucking coffee, mate. It's 6:30 a.m. and in 20 minutes I'm scheduled to interview Amber fucking Rudd. I just need the fucking caffeine. Give me my fucking skinny latte. We don't call it a skinny latte anymore, sir, because that phrase is considered fat shaming. So I would just fuck off then. Peter Tatchell getting arrested in Russia, protesting their disgusting record on gay rights. I'm with you every step of the fucking way. Putting a rainbow on a placemat in Wagamama's. Who is that for, exactly? Or are you just cynically hijacking an entire social movement to promote your chain of restaurants by wrapping your corporate brand in rainbow-coloured virtue to help you sell dumplings? Stop politicising my dumplings. This is just a corporate extension of this modern phenomenon of demonstrating how fucking right on and fucking woke we all are. I see people who define themselves as anti-fascist on their Twitter profiles. Who isn't? I'm sorry, that's the default setting. It's not impressive to be anti-fascist. Imagine showing off about that. I am not a fascist. Good! What do you want, a fucking medal? Not endorsing fascism is about as common as not endorsing fingering children, okay? Can we not just work from the assumption that most people, even people we don't like, aren't fascists? Vice magazine recently reviewed the trailer for the new live-action remake of Dumbo and said the trailer was, and I quote, cute and heartwarming and seemingly neither racist nor terrifying. News just in, the new Dumbo film probably isn't racist. What on earth made you think it would be? This is what identity politics does to you. It turns your fucking head into blancmange. You can't see the world how it actually is. You see racism and oppression where there is none. A white girl singing along to Kendrick Lamar doesn't make her a racist. Let's not pretend it does, okay? That executive from Netflix who got fired last week for saying an offensive word in a meeting that was called to discuss the use of offensive words. Welcome to 2018, where context and intent are no longer required to brand your fellow citizens fucking racist. It's madness, and yet it's mainstream. It's fucking normal. The new Star Wars film drew criticism because it doesn't deal with the issue of slavery in a satisfactory manner. Shut up! I'm fucking watching Star Wars! The film Dunkirk was criticised for not having enough women or people of colour in it. It's set in the English Channel during World War fucking II. This is the politicisation of art, which of course is the end of fucking art, and it's fucking everywhere. J.K. Rowling got a pasting from LGBT activists because Dumbledore isn't openly gay in the new Fantastic Beasts film. Is this really the height of the gay community's oppression? I don't for 1 second believe that it is, but if it is, the war's already been won. Okay, if the worst thing that's happening is a wizard not being shown taking it up to the elbow, you fucking made it. Chill out. It's all fucking good, mate. Do you really think any normal person, and when I say normal, I mean white, black, girl, boy, gay, straight, and everything in between, you know, fucking normal, do you think any normal person really gives a fuck about this shit? Anyone normal, they just want to eat their fucking noodles, drink their skinny latte, watch their crappy kids movie, appreciate old novels written by people with different sets of values to us, and of course speak out against racism and oppression and injustice, but where it actually exists. Because there's a lot of it about. There's a lot of it in this country, but you won't find it in a novel written 100 years ago, or on a picture of an egg, or in a movie about a flying fucking elephant. Crows? What? I've never seen Dumbo. Yeah. Well, it's a beautiful day, so we're up on the studio roof. Today, we're going to be discussing Laura Ingalls Wilder.
Well, if you haven't heard Jonathan Pye in his element and in full flow, you have now. The guy is a serious talent. His real name is not Jonathan Pye. That's his alter ego, stand-up comedian. I don't remember, in fact, his real name. I've actually seen him interviewed, or I've seen a YouTube clip of him interviewed on telly as himself, and he says he's not actually got the politics of Jonathan Pye. I find that hard to believe, because how can you be so great at understanding the issues and getting them across if you don't actually believe what you're saying? Because bear in mind, he writes that stuff. So, you know, he's not acting someone else's words. He's clearly a genius, and he's got an amazing backstory. He was a down on his heels, living in a bedsit, all that kind of stuff. He couldn't get himself together as a stand-up comic. He'd been doing it for years. All of a sudden, he started putting the odd piece to camera on YouTube. It then got tens, hundreds of thousands of viewers, of downloads, and he's now an international star. I saw he was in Australia on a major tour, a sellout tour. Absolutely fantastic. So if you get a chance to catch him, I'm sure he's great. I haven't seen him live myself. I'm sure if he comes to my part of the world, I definitely will. So the Booms and Bust show, for any new listener, is about free markets and capitalism, and showing up 21st century liberalism, in other words, socialism, cronyism, communism, fascism, communism. They're all the same. They're all in the spectrum. Okay, they're not the same, but they're all in the spectrum. And socialism is the great scourge of our planet. Some people will say that the great scourge of our planet is drugs. Others might say it's the EU. Others might say it's the Bilderbergs or the Davos community. For me, Bilderbergs, Davos, it's all about elitism, cronyism, which means fascism, communism, and socialism. And then, of course, the bastardization of these, which was Stalinism and this nonsense that they have in the likes of China, and, of course, North Korea, which we covered a little last week. If you want to converse with me during the week, either tweet me at BoomsBustsShow, or pop me an email at jd@theboomsandbustsshow.com, jd@theboomsandbustsshow.com. And indeed, if you listen to this show fairly regularly, you should also be reading the Booms and Busts report, which I email out every 2 months. It's free of charge. It puts some meat on the bones on markets particularly, whereas the show is about politics, economics and markets. So it's got some really good ideas, good questions for you to think about with regards to perhaps what you should be doing, building for your retirement and tax planning and so on. I don't give financial advice. That's in my day job. In the show and in the Booms and Bust report, it's just about ideas and concepts. If you do email me there, I can assure you, you will never be junk mailed. One of the big issues of our day, surely, is state control, artificial intelligence, computers, and how the state is just gaining enormous amounts of data about us. The UK government's Home Office has just announced plans for a centralised biometric database of the citizens, compiling DNA, fingerprint, face, and possibly even voice data. 2 questions. Firstly, what could possibly go wrong? And secondly, has no one ever watched a dystopian future sci-fi movie? It's beyond obvious where we're heading, and all you have to do is think about all these future movies that we've ever watched that where the state control, even something from the 1970s like Blake's 7. Anyone will remember Blake 7, the lowest budget thing to come out of the BBC's science fiction department since Doctor Who in the 1960s. Where you walked on the stage and half the walls rattled. But it was good fun when you were 15 years old, as I was. But it's beyond obvious where we're heading. And until we bring back libertarianism, if ever we had it, if ever we bring back capitalism, if ever we stop banning bank bailouts, quantitative easing, let the market set interest rate, prosecute bank generals, end Help to Buy, all the blooming interventions to keep the elite, until we bring in free market capitalism, it's beyond obvious where we're heading. Change the subject, but, it's all part of the socialism that we have in our society. Can someone please tell me why on earth it's allowable that a Muslim male in Britain is allowed, as we know, up to 4 Muslim marriages? That in itself, if that's what they want to do, I've got nothing against that. But why are 3 of the wives treated as single mothers and able to claim child benefit and social bloomin' housing? This is a disgrace! And many of them are the immigrants, where 60% of them aren't earning any money at all anyway. It's a total, utter disgrace. I see Diane James MEP. Wasn't she the one who was for like a nanosecond the leader of UKIP, and the MEP children of UKIP decided to throw their toys out the pram again and got rid of her? She is now an independent MEP. Rightly, she left UKIP. I think that's right. I'm sure it is. She tweeted that the Electoral Commission figures just published show that the official pro-European Union campaign is partly funded by Goldman Sachs, Citigroup, Morgan Stanley, as well as Airbus, Eurostar, European companies. And of course, Airbus has been out there doing the Project Fear again. But those banks, those bulge bracket investment banks, the masters of the universe, not just the top 1%, the top 0.1%. And that's assuming you're only a lowly associate or even a junior managing director. And tell me, I know some of them listeners here will watch avidly Max Kaiser on Russia Today, and he calls these people the scourge of the earth. There's another phrase he uses. I can't immediately remember. It might come back to me in the show. But why is he constantly tweeting against Brexit? Why is he working alongside the investment banking? That's it, the banking cartel. Can someone please answer me that question? Talking about Brexit and anti-Brexit, we read that campaigners from the Fair Vote Project, talk about Orwell, were hired, indeed paid, to support a second EU referendum during a protest in Parliament Square. And who paid them? An organisation linked to fascist Max Mosley. Once a Mosley, always a Mosley. But getting back to free speech and sense of justice and a moving towards libertarianism, not much, but some is better than none. Over the pond in America, just beware that hashtag Trump derangement syndrome can be career ending. We read on the website, I think it's called The Hill, that the newspaper reporter who wrongly claimed that the Capital Gazette shooter, I think 5 journalists were murdered by a gunman in their offices a week or so back. This newspaper reported that he wore a MAGA hat, Make America Great Again. Well, he made it up, and he's just been fired. CBC in British Columbia, that's in Canada. It's a bit like saying the BBC in Britain. Okay, CBC tell us that a tea house, or we would say a tea shop manager in Stanley Park has been fired after refusing to serve a Trump supporter. We're seeing more and more anecdotes like this. Bring it on! Trump derangement syndrome can indeed, now, after a year and a half of Trump being president, it can be career-ending. History that liberals, or as I call them, socialists, will never talk about. The first black Democrat senator was elected 25 years ago in 1993. The first black Republican senator was elected 148 years ago in 1870. Yes, you heard right. 1870. History that socialists will never talk about. Part 2. 12.5 million Africans were shipped to the New World. 10.7 million made it to the New World, disembarking in the Americas, plural. Of the 10.7 million Africans, only 388,000 were shipped to North America. Nearly 5 million went to Brazil. Two parts of history that socialists will never talk about. Talking of socialists, on June the 26th, in the Democratic primary for the US Congress in New York, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez beat the incumbent who was actually likely to take over Nancy Pelosi's leadership of the Democratic Party and leader of the House. In other words, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez deposed the Crown Prince of the Democrat Party. Pretty huge, huh? She's a young woman. I think she's under 30. She might be in her early 30s. She's one of the youngest female Democrats ever elected, or potentially elected, because she will get in, there's no question. This was her socialist manifesto. Medicare for all. And we know how that works in the UK, don't we, listener? This is funny. Universal jobs guarantee. Well, actually, Ms. Ocasio-Cortez, they tried that in Soviet Union. Yes, it's true, they were very successful. They didn't have any unemployment in the Soviet Union. So yeah, I guess on the face of it, it must be a really good... do you know what I've just realised? They had hundreds of thousands, and over time they had over 10 million in the gulags. Yeah, it's true. They were gainfully employed, it's true. But probably not what your voters imagine universal jobs guarantee means. Fully funded public schools and universities, paid family and sick leave, housing is a human right. Now, would that be 10-bedroom houses? Would it be penthouses? What are we talking about as a human right exactly? And does it mean with a $20,000 sound system? Is that what it means? Justice system reform. Immigration justice. What's unjust about the immigration system? Or you mean that they don't let illegal people in? That's not unjust. Infrastructural overhaul. She wants 100% renewable green. Clean campaign finance. Yeah, as if she's going to have clean campaign finance. And an economy of peace that supports our veterans and actively values all humanity. Yeah, okay. Very good. She got elected because the voters just want to believe this thing called socialism. You want to know why the people are voting for socialism in certain parts of the world, and particularly in America? Because they've grown up in a world of plenty in which the Soviet Union already is a memory, and of course it's not taught in schools. China is of course now fascist. Just look at their system. No one sees inside North Korea. The media pretends that Cuba and Venezuela don't happen, or if they do, it's not socialism. And no one realizes that Scandinavia aren't socialists. Ludwig von Mises, the founding father of the Austrian School of Economics, quote, "Every socialist is a disguised dictator," unquote. Talking of which, we've just had a dreadful election in Mexico where the Mexican Bernie Sanders has just been swept into power as president. Andrés Manuel López Obrador. So, and this is the guy who says that it's a human right that you should be able to go to America if you want. Now think about that. The guy who's now the president of Mexico is saying that if you want to leave this country, you can. The Mexicans clearly don't know about Venezuela. So that suggests to me that the wall is definitely going to get built, because can you imagine the number of people who will indeed desperately need to flee ultra-socialist Mexico within a few years? On a happier note, back to America, the US Supreme Court, the top law interpreters in the country, interpreting the Constitution and their amendments. The Supreme Court says that government workers cannot be forced to contribute to trade unions. This is absolutely fantastic. So you just know, therefore, that just like in Britain, where when they got rid of the closed shop and they could vote against compulsory membership, particularly in the private sector, I don't know for sure, but I think it's still there. There is still a closed shop in the public sector, I think. Of course, membership of the private sector in trade unions went down the pan. And that, if that comes into law, if Congress actually makes it a law, because they've been given the go-ahead now by the Supreme Court justices, then of course the trade unions are going into oblivion. Fantastic news. The Supreme Court also has upheld the stated power of President Trump to ban travel from certain nations into the United States. This is, of course, a huge blow to the hate Trump brigade, who said it was fundamentally racist. Well, the Supreme Court has just said it's not. Last Wednesday, one of those Supreme Court justices, Justice Anthony Kennedy, who was basically sort of on the left of things, he's just announced that he would retire almost imminently. Democrats and leftists in the media went apoplectic. The wailing and gnashing of teeth, I read, could be heard and seen from space. It does mean that his replacement will be probably right of centre, and that does not actually mean that the Supreme Court therefore will start issuing decrees and announcements, as it were, of a right of centre nature in terms of societal issues. What it means is that the Supreme Court will be more focused, probably than for decades, on merely interpreting the Constitution and the amendments, and not, as leftists have come to believe, that it was actually a lawmaking court. It never has been. Quick few words on the World Cup. I note that FIFA put out that the 98 winners was France, and in 2002 they went out in the first round. The 2006 winner was Italy, and in 2010 they went out in the first round. In 2010 Spain won, they went out in the 2014 first round. In 2014 Germany won, and this year they exited in the first round. Looking at France, I think the French people have to be very, very worried indeed about the 2022 World Cup. Talking of which, Elaine Page had something to sing about the Argentinians, and it was something like this. Don't cry 4-3 Argentina. You get the point. I want to wish a very happy birthday to one of my absolute heroes, Professor Dr. Thomas Sowell. The great man has got to the great age of 88. He has said so many fantastic things in his life, and most of it came from hard evidence. He has studied the demographics. He has studied the American people, society, history for decades. I'm going to give you a sense of some of the things this great man has said. In a sense, the political left's attempts to silence ideas they cannot or will not debate are a confession of intellectual bankruptcy. A society that puts equality in the sense of equality of outcome ahead of freedom will end up with neither equality nor freedom. The use of force to achieve equality will destroy freedom, and the force introduced for good purposes will end up in the hands of people who use it to promote their own interests. Slavery has existed all over the planet for thousands of years, with black, white, yellow, and other races being both slaves and enslavers. Does that mean that everybody ought to apologize to everybody else for what their ancestors did? Guy is an absolute genius. Check out his long interview with Dave Rubin. I believe I've mentioned it on the Boomsend podcast show before. Absolute brilliant. He's got a new book out. He got a new book out at the age of 87 or something like that. Think about that. The guy's amazing. And before we look at economics and markets, I just want to remind you what this technical term cognitive dissonance means. In essence, this is why people get upset when their beliefs are challenged. It's what academic psychologists have concluded by researching the brain. A mental conflict occurs when beliefs are contradicted by new information. This conflict activates areas of the brain involved in personal identity and emotional response to threats. The brain's alarms go off when a person feels threatened on a deeply personal and emotional level, causing them to shut down and disregard any rational evidence that contradicts what they previously regarded as, quote, truth, unquote. You might want to listen to that again. In economics, you'll recall last week I was delighted. I cheered for joy that the For Britain party had included in Anne-Marie Waters' manifesto for a by-election the reintroduction of separation of private investment banking. In other words, bring back Glass-Steagall, quote unquote. Well, they've literally in the last, 24, 48, 72 hours, not quite sure, she has just tweeted out their new economics policy. And there's things there about cuts, and there's about efficiencies, and about ending HS2 and overseas aid and stuff like that. Well, it's all well and good, I wrote back to her. But what happened to Glass-Steagall that you had in the by-election? There's nothing there about help to buy, banning bailouts, letting market-set interest rates, prosecuting bank generals. The fact is, Miss Marie Waters, all you've done there is scratch the surface. It's all marginal. It doesn't get to the root of the problem of elitism, socialism, cronyism, fascism, etc. Communism. It doesn't get to those problems. In other words, everything you say there will change nothing. You're just another cronyist party. So what's new? And incidentally, it was Godfrey Bloom, who was chucked out of UKIP after being a founder member and all the rest of it, who drew up the economics code for the For Britain party. Inflation. US headline the price index rose to 2.3% year on year, and core inflation is at 2%. This is the first time that both inflation measures, core by the way means excluding food and energy, because apparently food and energy are not bought by households. Exactly. It's the first time that both of them have been at the Fed's 2% target for 6 odd years. Don't tell me there isn't, we're not in an inflationary period, because we are. Now, there's a wonderful chart which you could find out yourself on FRED, which is the Federal Reserve Economics Department. They've got wonderful charts that you can build for yourself. It shows QE1, QE2 and QE3 and the effect of the Federal Reserve Bank's total assets. And in 2009, it went from less than $500 billion. It went up to $1.4 trillion almost overnight. Because remember, 800 billion was the TARP that just happened immediately. That was QE1, and they kept that going basically to 2009. And then Federal Reserve total assets were, slightly rising for the next couple of years. And then, boom, 2012, we had QE2, an extra $500 or $600 billion. And then in 2013, QE2 ended. We had a period where the Federal Reserve's balance sheet was flat. And then we got QE3 in 2013, 2014. And Federal Reserve's total assets went up another $1 to $1.25 trillion. And through 2014, 2015, we saw the Federal Reserve's total assets go up another $500 billion. 2016 and 2017, we didn't have any QE, so the balance sheet broadly stayed the same. In fact, it went down ever so slightly, a few small tens of billions, from 4,500 billion. Now, what's very interesting, at the end of 2017, in December, we started to get a thing called QT, quantitative tightening, reduction in the Federal Reserve balance sheet. And indeed, since the end of 17 to date, we have seen the Federal Reserve balance sheet fall by about 180 billion. It's still a tiny amount out of 4,500 billion. But it's there. And you know what? From the autumn of this year, QT will rise to 50 billion a month. Which means, of course, by the end of 2019, so long as we don't have another set of bailouts and all the rest of it, the $4.5 to $5 trillion balance sheet that they got up to is likely to be something like $3.5 to $4 trillion balance sheet. Material fall, a material negative stimulus. Won't it be an absolute head exploder if we continue to get economic and stock markets growth with QT? Because if you listen to all the bears, they will tell you that the only reason why the stock market's rising is because of QE. Well, as a market bull, I'm not convinced of that. Similarly, with QT, I think we're going to see stock market growth and continued mild economic growth. On verra. The Standard & Poor's, the rating agency, they have raised the Greek risk rating up to B+. They've set the outlook to stable. You'd normally expect something like that to have a positive effect on the government bonds, which will also have a positive effect on the Greek stock market. On verra. Can't imagine why I'm bullish Greece. I read that more than 7,000 UK high street estate agents are showing signs of financial distress. Sorry. As they face fewer sales and online competition, says accountancy firm Moore Stevens. I'm so very, 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 very sorry. I'm so sorry. They say that some 27% of agents are, it's terrible, struggling to survive. One of the main reasons, the report says, is a longer-term decline in property sales. You wouldn't imagine that if you'd listened to estate agents in the last few years, would you? Or the mainstream media. Between 2014 and 2017, the number of sales in London dropped by 20%. Really? Not terrible. It's just terrible. Of course, the actual report is probably nonsense, because although the number of sales has gone down materially, which it has, of course, there's still a very healthy lettings market. So I think actually they're crying wolf. But all I can say is bring it on if it actually is anywhere remotely near the truth. I saw the most amazing short video. Sweden has built a 1.25 mile or kilometre test track road, which will power your electric vehicle while you're driving along. Don't tell me that electric cars aren't coming. They are. And therefore, there's going to be literally an exponential growth in electricity, which means there's going to be a need for more and more energy. Did anyone mention uranium? And I read this brilliant tweet, and he's absolutely correct. I think his name's Brian Shannon, great guy, a New Zealander. I think that's his name. He said, 95% of investors are debating whether or not we're in a recession or about to go into one. The other 5%, and I count myself in this, I'm in the 5% crowd. The other 5% are debating whether second quarter growth was 3.5% or 3.8%. And I'm with the 5%. Markets. Okay, let's start with the dollar. The dollar had a very major bear market in 2017. And in the last few months since late February, March, it's had a sizable rally of about 5 or 6%. No mean feat at all. And when it went up to 95, the dollar index, against a basket of major currencies, it didn't like it and it bounced down. I think it's done that twice now. And this could suggest a resumption of the bear market. However, the technical indicators are probably still more bullish than bearish. I wouldn't give up the rally yet. But if it is the end of the rally, well, expect commodities to absolutely soar. Talking of which, you know what I've been saying on oil. Oil got up to $73. It pulled down into the mid-60s. And in the space of 2 weeks, it rose $10. And I've been bullish throughout. I am, however, seeing some negative divergence in the technical indicators, diverging from the price, suggesting potential short-term weakness. So in the short term, I wouldn't be surprised to see it go down even $15 to the high 50s. But at the same time, I'm still looking at $80 as an outlook in the next few to several months. $80. Because that's the upper resistance line, a downtrend line stretching from 2008 to date. It was $150 or so in 2008. It was $110 in 2014. And about $80 is where we meet that downtrend line. And that could well happen by the end of this year or early into next year. We'll see. What I do know is that the commitment of traders, we've seen money managers last week add huge longs. And when that happens and they start to get, or they are very, very optimistic, it's amazing how often we see the price do the opposite. I also want to mention gold and the commitment of traders. We now have the lowest speculators long positioning in nearly a year. we also see money managers are net short. They're actually net short for the first time in 2.5 years. What happened in the first half of 2016 to gold? It went up 30%, and junior gold miners went up 100 to 250% in about 6 or 7 months. And we're in a situation very similar to then in terms of commitment of traders. In terms of the charts, we see a very thin wedge through the whole of 2018 from late January to now. The price is down, it's up, down, but we've got to practically the vertex on the wedge. And if you look at the very long-term monthly chart for like the last nearly 20 years of gold miners, we see, when I talk about divergence, I talk about technical indicators, I'm talking here about Bollinger Bands. I'm not going to explain what they are. Go and Google them. The Bollinger Bands are as tight as a rat's you-know-what. And the last time they were this tight was 2001-2, the beginning of a 10-year massive bull market. Am I saying that the short-term downtrend, we've seen gold now come down over $100? If I go to the chart as it stands right now, just give me a second, click it up, it's on a low again, $1,247. I've been saying for weeks, I don't like it. It's heading down. My goodness. Silver, as I speak, it's 3:05 on Monday, the 2nd of July. Silver is down 1.4%. Junior miners, they're only down about 1%. It's interesting. That's my point. Miners have been holding up much better than the commodities themselves. And it is interesting because I always used to say miners leads silver, which leads gold. If you're in a major trend, whether down or up. And the fact is, we're seeing the commodities go down, but we're not seeing the miners go down. And in fact, when I look at junior miners this year, they're flat. It's amazing. Miners are flat. So, there is bullishness in gold markets. Are we near the bottom? Probably. I would say if we break to 1,200 on gold, then do you know what? We could be going back to $1,000. We really could. But we'll see. We're at roughly 1250 at the moment. We shall see. Now, I need to go back to my recording gizmo. 57.5 minutes. Oh, gosh. Stocks are bullish, but there are questions. I mentioned Overstock. It's just signed a letter of intent. It's got $160 million in. Overstock's got a market cap of about $1 billion. It went up 12% on Friday. 12%. It's got £500 million in cash. The whole company is a value of $1 billion. I mean, I would say it's dirt cheap, but we'll see. It's hard to tell. China is going to double its atomic power over the next X years. Quotes of the week comes from Bill Maher. One way you get rid of Donald Trump is a crashing economy, so please bring on the recession. Sorry if that hurts people, but it's either root for a recession or lose your democracy, because apparently Donald Trump hates democracy, says Bill Maher on June the 8th with an estimated net worth of $100 million. Final comment. I told the hard left, I earned this year £140,000. I was privately educated. I spent my childhood in a 7-bedroomed house. And my pension pot is worth around £2 million. They attacked me for being one of the top 1%. I told them my name, Jeremy Corbyn. They said they loved me and they'd vote for me. I've had a blast. I'll see you next week.